Bang. Press the button. I think it's what. Oh, there we go.
Integrated.
Cool. So, did anyone? What did people think of the name of the calendar event?
Could you share that one again? I'm sure I read it, but there was a lot.
Meeting of the Mages.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
What does it
I
actually
played D&D. Like,
What
What were you saying, Niels?
are mages? I'm not familiar with the word.
Oh, is that D&D right there, Christoph, or what is that?
oh my god, yeah, there it is. Yeah, yeah.
I think
Wizard.
I think
Okay.
mage is a wizard, yeah, or a
Okay.
magician sort of thing.
Yeah, nice.
So, yeah, let's get started. I have a couple of videos, interactive things I also wanted to show. Oh, so if you can't hear it, just let me know. Like, it should be also shared the screen and the sound. So
Yeah.
this is like some awesome clip from like the 80s. It's like some video lectures on programming, and they're just absolutely fascinating. So just let's just watch like the first minute.
Yeah.
There's the first mage.
I don't know if I can hear it.
Nah, me
Oh.
neither.
Like, can anyone hear it?
Nope.
Ah, let me try. And the music's like the best part. Let me try and reshare the screen because there's a button that I got to press to share sound.
All right.
As far as mages now.
That's why I got my cape on. I'm kind of disappointed.
I was just gonna say, yeah. I don't want to draw attention to it in case,
Why not?
Oh, well, in case you forgot that you were wearing your cape.
Don't forget that. One of the other artists who's not here, unfortunately, she does also like a lot of like really creative stuff. I'm gonna do like this whole thing with like mushrooms and like paint it up. It's gonna be sick. All right, I'll try again. Can people hear that?
Yep.
Sweet.
Yeah. Actually, that's a terrible way to start. Computer science is a terrible name for this business. First of all, it's not a science. It might be engineering, or it might be art, or we'll actually see that computer, so-called science, actually has a lot in common with magic. And we'll see that in this course. So it's not a science. It's also not really very much about computers. And it's not about computers in the same sense that physics is not really about particle accelerators. And biology is not really about microscopes and petri dishes. And it's not about computers in the same sense that geometry is not really about using surveying instruments. In fact, there's a lot of commonality between computer science and geometry. Geometry, first of all, is another subject with a lousy name. The name comes from Gaia, meaning the earth, and metron, meaning to measure. Geometry originally meant measuring the earth or surveying. And the reason for that was that thousands of years ago, the Egyptian priesthood developed the rudiments of geometry in order to figure out how to restore the boundaries of fields that were destroyed in the annual flooding of the Nile. And to the Egyptians who did that, geometry really was the use of surveying instruments. Now, the reason that we think computer science is about computers is pretty much the same reason that the Egyptians thought geometry was about surveying instruments, and that is when some field is just getting started and you don't really understand it very well, it's very easy to confuse the essence of what you're doing with the tools that you use. And indeed, on some absolute scale of things, we probably know less about the essence of computer science than the ancient Egyptians really knew about geometry. Well, what do I mean by the essence of computer science? What do I mean by the essence of geometry? See, it's certainly true that these Egyptians went off and used surveying instruments, but when we look back on them after a couple of thousand years, we say, gee, what they were doing, the important stuff they were doing was to begin to formalize notions about space and time, to start a way of talking about mathematical truths formally that led to the axiomatic method, that led to sort of all of modern mathematics. figuring out a way to talk precisely about so-called declarative knowledge, what is true. Well, similarly, I think in the future, people will look back and say, yes, those primitives in the 20th century were fiddling around with these gadgets called computers. But really what they were doing is starting to learn how to formalize intuitions about process, how to do things. Right. Right. Starting to.
So I'm going to pause that there. Like, it's a very fascinating lecture, and he goes on to describe, the difference between these different sorts of knowledge that we can have. We can have knowledge about like specific things that just like, this is true, that is true, and that is true. And then we can have this sort of what he goes on to talk about, this process, which is more like like a recipe, let's say, on how to do something or how to solve something. I think maybe I can go a little bit forward and see so here is an example of saying this is something that's true, like a mathematical statement. And then if we,
the square root.
what he's calling like imperative knowledge is more like the steps of like, how do you actually compute the square root? Like, you can say something about it and you can say that's true, but the more powerful thing to actually have is like the ability to not just to know it, but to be able to use that knowledge to do something. So with these sort of processes, or let's say programs, which don't actually need to be written in software, right? They can just have been something you thought up, or an exercise you came up with, or something that you told someone in order to achieve something. Yes. And so this lecture series was done by two professors, and I just absolutely found it fascinating when I was learning programming to watch from these two. They're just so insightful in comparison to a lot of the teachers you find today who teach computer science. I will show another minute or two from the second part to the introduction. I find it very fascinating the way they go on to, or he describes a little bit about what is actually going on. And yeah, when I was alluding to like, the mages, right? Like, it's sort of like this idea that what people don't understand, they have the tendency to call like, God or magic, or like they put this fancy term on there. And so this is sort of like, you have a lot of power with, let's say, these programs or procedures. If you really understand a lot of things, you can make a lot of stuff happen that other people have no idea about what's going on. But like, so.
Hi. You've seen that the job of a programmer is to design processes that accomplish particular goals, such as finding the square roots of numbers or other sorts of things that you might want to do. We haven't introduced anything else yet. Of course, the way in which a programmer does this is by constructing spells, which are constructed out of procedures and expressions, and that these spells are somehow direct a process to accomplish the goal that was intended by the programmer. In order for the programmer to do this effectively, he has to understand the relationship between the particular things that he writes, these particular spells, and the behavior of the process that he's attempting to control. So what we're going to do in this lecture is attempt to establish that connection in as clear a way as possible.
So you can note there as well, like, he didn't say anything about particularly software, like this idea of programs or instructions or the ability to do something in the world.
It's just a tool.
Yeah, it's just a tool, exactly. And this sort of way of thinking, when you start to look at problems, or I want to do some task, I want to cook something, being able to put it in your head in a way that is, let's say, well, you can think about it as a procedure or a process that needs to be done, and what are all the moving parts? As he said, like, you need to understand the behaviors and the relationships to be able to actually tell, am I building something that is having the effect that I want? And he call it spells, right? Like in one instance, if I sit down at the computer and
Love that.
yeah, so if I make it so that when someone types their name in, this spell runs, and now all of a sudden, it could go off and hack them, or it could display a form, or hello Tom. Like there's so many different things that process could do. And why am I talking about this? We'll see. It'll be clear, I hope, soon. Let's jump to the presentation.
I already strongly resonate with this because it's also how I approach training and also
I think
mental
I think you're gonna vibe so hard with this topic.
Yeah,
I
for
know this is
sure.
all you. So this is so I'm starting this nonprofit called. The name isn't yet fixed, as it says on the bottom. I actually want to name it after using an Aboriginal dialect. But it's kind of actually really hard to get in contact with them. There's so many different dialects, and the first translation I got, I didn't really like. So that's the cool thing, is that there's like hundreds of dialects or thousands of dialects. So I can find one that I like the sound of. But yeah, so I'm starting this nonprofit, and this is sort of like the intention there is like just how I feel right now. I'm just sick of all the shit in the world. I'm sick of like the pain and my friends not doing well and like struggling and all the problems. And I'm like, all right, like let's fucking change it, let's do something about it. Yeah. So, and I really like to quote a lot of people. And I'm not doing this. One of my friends, Charlie, I think he's also here. He said sometimes it comes across as if I'm trying to like an appeal to authority. It's like this person said it, so it's true. And that's definitely not my intention here. Like a lot of the people that I'm quoting and referencing, I would see as like mentors or people who've inspired me. And it's more like I'm just like doting on them, and like, I don't know, also want to give them credit for their ideas and the knowledge that they've given me. Yeah. So I'll just read out some stuff from this. This is from a creator of a programming language, Andrew Kelly. He also started a nonprofit to fund his language, and there's a little text he wrote up on his blog. So I'll just read it out. I know everyone can read, but I'll read it out. So, don't you want to get rich, they ask. Even the bank employee indicated this was an unusual process, setting up an account for a nonprofit. She had to call her manager in several times to help figure out the system. I think we have it precisely backwards. The whole point of money is spending it to enrich your life and the lives of those around you. It's a means to an end. It's not the end in and of itself. Except for a VC-backed startup company, where it's growth, but for the same cause, really, money is not the primary purpose. Despite whatever grandiose social good the company claims to stand for, at the end of the day, the incentive structure is only aligned for profit. How do we allow this to become the default? So that article I can also recommend to read. He flushes that out in a bit more detail. Okay, felt like that slide's a bit out of order. Yeah, so one of the things I like, there's many ways when I've been trying to sort the ideas of like what it is I'm doing and to be able to tell people, and I'm still doing that. This is like one way of maybe saying it, like researching, building, and actually yeah, like running or taking those ideas and applying them to the world. The school of being, so like a school for people, like how to know how to be, to act, to think, to live. Another way is to say it's a project about removing the unnecessary suffering from the world. I think unnecessary is the important part, because in any I don't know, let's say you want to go from A to B, right? There's one way that is the quickest way, and then there may be other ways that also get there, but they have a lot of unnecessary, let's say, work, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But in this case of suffering and misery, it's like, let's just try and remove that where possible. Like I'm just, yeah, like I believe there's a lot of it is unnecessary. So why am I doing this presentation? Why have I got my friends and people here that I feel like are interested in this? What is this first presentation about? And the focus of this is self-work, like motivating people to do self-work, self-growth, to look at yourselves, to give a bit of tools, and to also like a bit of a hint and a notion as to like why this is such an important thing. And it ties into very much like the goal, like the goals of what it is I'm trying to do. But this lecture is about sort of trying to give a bit of motivation. And as a secondary goal, it's about, yeah, of course, putting these ideas out there to find people to network with, as well as to collaborate. And I have an email here, feedback@supersymmetryenergyconnection.com, where people can go to send feedback. I'm just going to skip that because I don't think I updated it. So I'm going to start by talking about the problem, first of all, that I see. So we can agree on that and then see where the rest of the thinking goes. So, oh, I have a spelling thing there. Superfluous. I can't even say that. Superfluously, unnecessarily suffering. Yeah, so this is the thing I don't like. I don't like that in myself. I don't like that in the world around me, especially when I see it with my friends or even in the world at large, right? It's just sort of not a nice thing to see. That's the problem statement. What I've done there, you can see in the parentheses I've labeled this thing S11SS. This is like, I couldn't come up with a better concept or name for this unnecessary suffering, because I wanted to make it clear that I'm talking about that and not suffering in general. So that's why I put a name on it. And this naming convention comes from a lot of people are doing it in the programming world now. For instance, super, I shouldn't have picked this word. It has 11 letters in between the, or if you get rid of the adjective form, so between can someone say that? How to say it?
Superfluous. I can't even do it. Superfluously. Blech. It's a terrible
Superfluous.
word.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a great word,
superfluous.
but blech.
So between the two S's, there's 11 digits. So that's where that comes from. So you get S11S and then S for the suffering. So just, it's a bit weird, but I find if I keep saying suffering and suffering and suffering and don't make it clear that it's the unnecessary one, people might, just makes it a bit easier to understand that it's this specific thing that I'm talking about and not general suffering. So in general, a lot of people get this mixed up. Yeah, even myself, it's very easy to jump to solution. Oh yeah, this is what it is. It's the money thing. No, it's the problem that people aren't intelligent enough. It's the problem of poverty. Like, we need to do this or that. People very quickly start coming out with ideas and implementing things and putting resources and time into things, even on themselves, right? Like, oh, I have a bad, whatever it is, I have a bad back. I need to take like pills. I need to go to the doctor, and like, this is going to fix my problem. It's what I'm saying here is the solution is, first of all, to figure out what the problem is so we can fix it. So once we know what the actual problem is, we can fix that instead of fixing something that's not really the problem, and it just sort of half fixes it. So I'm going for a solution here that like makes a lasting change, let's say, and not just like a band-aid approach. Like, one day someone's feeling a bit better, but then, like, it's, yeah. So unnecessary suffering, S11SS. I see, for me, like, the primary cause of this would be people not doing what it is that they want day to day. And this was something for me that I went on. It took a long journey to start doing this, to start listening to, let's say, my intuition and my feelings of what was what I wanted to do, and like doing it, and not like holding myself back out of fear or like nervousness or some excuse, I'm not good enough, or that's yeah. And once I started to realize, like, no, like, there's things that intrinsically I want to do, like, it could be artwork, it could be to give a talk or speak to someone I see on the street, or it comes up moment to moment during the day. And when ignore those things, or when people, I would also, I haven't read much about this topic, but this, yeah, so that's why I was talking from my own experience. When people don't do what it is that they really want in life, like, or moment to moment, I personally feel like this sort of sinking, like, just like a bit of a, it's like in my stomach region. It's like this feeling of, I wouldn't say it's negativity, but it's like, I don't feel good. And I have a background of dealing with depression. And when you get into these cycles, the way I understand it now is like you're so constantly in this place of reacting to things in the way that you don't want to, not speaking your mind, and not being true to really who you are and what it is that you feel, that you end up just like being completely drained and feeling just so bad all the time, and not having a way to, like, the opposite of this is when you do something you like you get a little bit of a, like, if you're always doing constantly what you like, which is what I'm doing now, like I don't notice it anymore. But like before for me, like when I would start to the first time, there's something I want to do. I want to give a talk like this, like, or whatever. Like I want to talk to someone. I don't know how to. And so I think about it, I make a plan, and then I try, and maybe I'm really nervous about it, but I do it. And then it gives you like this little boost of like self-belief, of like this little kick, and so this is for me, this active part. This is something I have under my control as a human being, is how I choose to act and behave. I may see problems in the workplace, and if I don't speak up my mind and say something, I also feel a bit like, just, like my body is letting me know, like, you weren't in line with who you wanted to be. And so when I, personally make these steps and follow that intuition, even if it could be into some situation I'm not sure how to deal with, I'm learning, I'm growing, and I'm feeling alive, let's say. This would be for me one of the primary causes, because once you fix this, a lot of the other stuff starts to free up. And this has been my experience personally. Like once you really start to get with this, it takes a while, and there's a skill set that's required as well. How do you do that? How do you always do what it is that you want and believe that that's the right way? Because a lot of people will tell you, no, you shouldn't do that. You should behave like this, and that's wrong, and so on. And to really find that belief in your being and naturalness, and to accept that and to reject things that go against that, it took me a very long time. And secondary thing I think is that one of the causes a lot of people like to put actually is first, as I've written here, reactively, this is suffering that's caused by bumping into things we don't like. So this could be people blaming the bank or the government system, or rubbing up against things that exist out there in the world, stubbing their toe, like you decided to walk and there's a thing in the way, you hit it, like, so it wasn't necessarily, it was like a reactive, something happened to you that you didn't like, essentially, which is less, like, it's a bit less under your control. And for me, I've come up with this definition then of sickness, which is essentially not being able to do what you want, either like that you can't do it, or you're not able. Not able is the same thing. Because for me, it seems like all of the other forms of suffering, of pain, of disillusionment, and the different issues we see in the world seem to come from this fact of like just not. I don't know. It's like the physical circumstance doesn't really matter. I could be, let's say, a slave, and if I'm very happy in that, so like if I'm very accepting and willing of, when I know what's going on, and I want to be a slave at that point in time, then it's like I'm not really suffering, But there's a lot of nuance in this example, right? So the moment I say, hey, I don't want to, and I'll give the full example here. The moment I say, hey, look, I don't want to be a slave anymore, I probably start to find like a bit of discomfort, because I'm like, well, I'm trapped, maybe, like either maybe it's by physical restraint or some other means, and that's not a good place. So what some people do is they they employ the tactic of disillusionment, you know, to not feel this trappedness. They say, look, change how you think about it, or you shouldn't think about escaping or whatever, because it's going to make you, it's better to believe, like to be happy being a slave and like tell yourself this lie, even though there's a part of you that will know, like, no, I actually want to be out of here. And I'm only doing this because I can't deal with this pain that I'm feeling. But that pain is kind of important. Anyway, I digress, as I always do. So I'm talking about this idea of like what people should be, or I as an individual, people in general should do what it is that they want. And yeah, so let's talk about what people want, because a lot of the times when you ask people, what do you want in life? Or yeah, even myself for a long time, I didn't really know. I couldn't cognitively put it into words. You know, like I get up and I sleep and I do things. I go to uni, I go to work. Like, are those things I want to do, or, you know, am I doing them even though I don't want to? You know, that's sort of that idea of, yeah. So some things I've concluded that people want, like, yeah, we want to feel good. We don't want, it's like the opposite of suffering, essentially. Like, we want to be running around like little children and just sucking up the sunshine and looking at, yeah, interacting with the nature and the environment or each other, and just being like joyous for this chance we have to be here. Yeah, and a couple of things that I've observed is that, yeah, or I think Charlie was the one who actually pointed this out to me, and like it made so much sense. It's like this social nature that we have is so predominant. Like, yeah, if you put a person somewhere on their own, like it's just not, it's not nice, you know. Like, we always want to be interacting, and a lot of what we do is about being part of a group or receiving love or receiving validation, or it's a huge focal point for the way our emotions work. And yeah, and I think that depending on how people see love, like a lot of people probably haven't thought about that, and I don't think I made a slide talking about love, but this is like, yeah, this idea of connectedness, of love, of being around each other. And if you look at music, right, or art, like it's just a huge theme. It's everywhere. So, and yeah, the second part was, yeah, with creation, as I put there, joy of creation. Another way would be to call that like even work. But right now, majority of us are doing work that's not in line with actually our beliefs and who we are and what we want. And this is why it's become this negative thing. You know, you need to go to work, and like, oh, I'm at work, or people say, I don't mind my work. You know, it's like, it's kind of rare to, there are people, I think self-employed people, not everyone, but you'll see they have much more joy in what they do, because they've figured this out, and they're kind of true to what it is that they want. They have much more control over that. And yeah, I think once you like, I've only ever been employed up until this point in my life, and you don't have that skill set to really be so aware of and have the freedom, let's say, to really push all the boundaries and be exactly as you want. There's sort of this idea that I have to accept what's given to me because I'm employed. So just when was the last time you did something you didn't want to?
Oh, like right now. Oh, okay. I was
Oh,
wondering if there's a hypothetical question.
It is meant to, it's there to, I have a bunch of questions in here which are more prompted just to self-reflection.
Okay.
But if someone has an answer that they want to share, I'm also happy to let you chime in there. No?
I have like undiagnosed ADHD, so like everything I do, I'm like, I don't want to do it, and then I have to do it anyway. So it's like all the time. But continue.
And you, what sort of things specifically? Like, what's one example?
Often like social things. Anytime like there's any kind of like remote conflict, like not even like mean conflict or like aggressive conflict, but like, hey, I have a problem with my work, I need your help to fix it. I'm like, oh, I don't want to say that, I don't want to do it, but you know, teamwork or working on remote teams doesn't really make that possible, so I do it anyway. But
Yeah, conflict's not a nice thing for sure.
Mhm. It's kind of part of life, but boy, it doesn't feel good.
No, it doesn't. Yeah, minimizing conflict definitely a good thing.
Mm.
I think a lot of the suffering that we have is definitely conflicts we have between ourselves and other people, like our relationships. I mean, yeah, if you look at families and friends, I mean, it's just kind of standard to see in fights and like just to have this state of, yeah, it's just a very common thing, unfortunately, it's normal almost that people fight amongst themselves like so often. When did you last cry because of how beautiful all of this is?
Yesterday.
Yeah, is
Yeah, I had a
that you, Niels?
yeah, man.
Yeah,
Yeah,
please share.
I had a very I was having a connecting coaching for myself back with my friend from whom I've came across connecting link. So I went to her for the first time in maybe a year or so. It was a very important topic because I was figuring out that since 2 weeks that I have some aggression and arrogance in me that I find super fucking annoying because I have this pet peeve when it comes to therapy and sports science when coaches work by standards of which I know are not helpful. It kind of makes me aggressive.
Mm.
So I set this high standards, and I fucking know that I set these standards for myself. So I'm for your other people, I'm I tend to be an idealist when it comes to my work and everything I do. And as soon as you're very perfectionistic, so you have these high standards, right? So you have high expectations of yourself. It's even worse when you don't meet those expectations. So me projecting that onto other coaches led me into a discussion where I noticed that I was reacting in a way that I didn't like at all. So it left me sleepless. And I was thinking of what the hell, where does this come from? And this is always, and Timothy knows this, there's a bunch of programmed behavior that we have that is so subconscious that you are rationally not able to grasp where you pick that up or where you develop this behavior. And yeah, yesterday was a very important session for me because I've seen that basically I went back to my 15-year-old self, who was a very lonely person, very sad person, and actually developing a nihilistic view of the world. And so I went to my younger self and gave myself a hug, which was a weird thing to do. I do this actually constantly with my own clients, that I bring them back to their younger self. But I rarely had that for myself happening. So it felt new to me, but it was a revelation that I realized that the one person who knows best what's good for me is myself, right? That's a no-brainer, but I really went up to myself, gave myself a big ass warm hug, and I started crying at that very moment, just thinking about that, having that envisioned, and gosh, it felt so good. It
Thank
felt
you for sharing that.
so fucking
Oh.
good. So that was a very important day for me yesterday. Yeah, I feel so much better with that now. Let's see how I behave towards other therapists from now on.
Yeah, man, you got this. Thank
Yeah,
you.
thanks for sharing that, Niels.
Yeah, man.
I would love to talk to you about those points that you were struggling with as well, if there's still things that you're dealing with, because I have some ideas about that I could share with you.
Mhm.
I would just want to share as well, like give some appreciation to Niels. Like, yeah, I did some like therapy, like I don't know, classes or whatever what do you call it, like a session.
Let's call it compassionate inquiry.
Yeah, yeah. So I did some compassion inquiry sessions with Niels, and for me, after that, that was a big turning point, I think, because this is one of the first times that I don't know. I mean, I've done therapy, just sharing with people, so I have a bit of background. I did like 2 years of behavioral therapy, and I'm sure it's different from person to person you're with, but I generally have the feeling that the therapist is more distanced. They, you know, they don't, they, they in Germany, they have this formal form of the word, like Zietz, like they call Siezen. So they'll use this way to talk to you. And it's kind of hard to open up and connect on an emotional level and open up when, yeah, this sort of this distance is there. And so I don't know, I was able to do that working with Niels, who's also, I think, like a good friend of mine now. And yeah, it was like that kicked off a lot of change in myself. Just getting more in touch with these emotions and yeah, being able to actually see beauty in the world. Before, there were other things that had happened that helped me to see that, but I'm not sure how it is for everyone else. But I was so sick, let's say, that I could not look around and just sit down and enjoy a sunset or enjoy the trees or the air on my face or even my friendships, to really feel, or yeah, intimate relationships as well, to really feel it in the body, in the soul, just like you know, and to be able to cry and just like, wow, this is so amazing to be alive. Like that experience was so foreign to me.
Hmm.
Um, so, and this is, yeah, when did you last cry because of how beautiful your own existence is?
2 days ago, I think.
When?
2 days ago, maybe on Thursday.
Yeah,
I
nice.
was I was having problem with my studies for a couple of years, you know that. So like I finally passed an exam and it was totally like amazing to like, yes, I can do it. And it took me like 5 times to pass that exam. So that time I realized, yes, I can do.
Yeah, it's an amazing feeling. You can do it. You did
Yes.
it.
Yeah.
Congrats,
Thank
man.
you.
Happy for you.
Thank you, man.
Yeah, and even I think important to note, even in the moments of failure, or when things are breaking down, or when they're not going our way, we can still learn to love ourselves and to realize, like, hey, even if the people around me are toxic or hurting me, like, or I'm alone here, like I am still, you know, a beautiful creature of this planet and universe, and I exist, and I deserve to exist. That was something that took me a long time to be able to do, and I think a lot of people struggle with this sort of self-love, and that's also a huge topic, I think. So I believe that this suffering that's unnecessary, S11SS, is something that we can actually control, and that's a good thing because it means we can do something about it. And if someone wanted to tell themselves, you know, it's not possible, the problem's too big, and all of this sort of thing, it's yeah, it's actually, I'm not sure about the maths behind it. But I do think actually that it's not possible. It's impossible to prove that some things aren't true. Like, or it's much harder, at least, to prove that some things are not true than it is to prove that things are true. And this has a lot of implications in the way that you make programs and things like that too. Just which I find kind of interesting. But even if it wasn't, like, you may as well try, because that trying alone, like you might learn something, you may be a bit wiser, and there's a chance there that it also turns out to be true. So yeah, this is sort of the way I'm thinking about it. But for me, based on those things we talked about, they do seem to be under our control. So some of the things that fall under this active part, things that I can do, things that I can control, is like yeah, this is what they talk a lot about in psychology, you know, acting, thinking, feeling, as well as the way you communicate with others. These are the tools that you have most close at hand. which you should be reaching for when there's something not going your way, instead of, you're not communicating well, you're not putting that, projecting essentially, or looking to the outside world as the source of fault. Yeah. Reactive part. So this was a tweet that Stuart Holloway, a developer, Clojure developer, put on his Twitter the other day. What is the most urgent thing you were trying to do on your phone when you were interrupted by an opportunity to rate the app? And I totally was like, oh my gosh, like, for two reasons. Number one is the amount of disrespect that the system and the systems we build, that software as well has for the users, and our time and our attention. It just pops up this thing that totally is not related to what we're doing and has an impact on us. And if you're aware of that, if you start to pay attention to that, you actually realize how annoying it is, and how much time that causes, and how much loss. And maybe it's not a good thing to start paying attention to, because I've started realizing in all the apps, they've designed things not for the human, and it's really, really, I have to meditate and calm myself down and just sort of accept the fact that this software is a million times slower than it has to be. There's so many different issues with it, not just software, but also legal systems and things like this. So yeah, this is me just ranting at the bottom here a little bit. Oh, I think I have oops. Does anyone want a chance to rant about something in the world that they don't like at this point? I hope this idea is clear, right? Is that I was doing something, and there was something that happened to me that was crappy that I didn't like. And yeah, other examples for me would be like, I don't know, I want to work in Germany, or I want to have a visa to be here or something, and then it's like, oh, you need to fill this form out, and then I don't know, okay, fair enough, like I'll do that, and then it's like you need to. A better example, the one that comes to my mind now, is like, every time I sign up for a freaking online service, number one, like, why do I have to sign up for all of the services? It's not necessary. Like, we already know that, but like, there's other ways of fixing that problem. The second thing is they always have these, like, you need to agree to the terms and conditions. And like, this is a legal thing, right? You need to, and like, no one reads it. And we still always have to pop it up and click the button because it's there. And it's like, really, like, just, can we not have a bit more respect for people and understanding, instead of like, we're like little stupid apes that have to do this, and then we're held liable now because we clicked the button of something we didn't read. Like, it's things like, oh, it's like,
Anyone know the South Park episode with the human centipede?
no, you want to elaborate?
Yeah, yesterday I got fucked with 300 euro. Don't ask.
No.
Yeah, I did something mistake and it took like 303 euro from my account. And
Oh, it's frustrating, no?
yeah, as I said, it was something, like you have to press the button to get that thing. And I was like, press the button, and in a in tiny corner, it was like written, the charge is 303 euro. In a tiny corner, you can't even see it. And that guy, it was like maybe I don't know, 3-4 months ago. It was for my study, so I was like downloading a PDF file, a book from a website, and then you have to agree, and then like they said like it won't charge you for like maybe 90 days or something like that, and then suddenly it charged me like 303 euro. I'm totally fucked up.
So sneaky.
Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
even it was okay if I like it, if it has meaning, like if it was an honest thing, I was okay with that, but it was not honest thing.
Yeah.
So I think I might have to go a bit quicker. I just looked at the time. I realized the time has flown, so
Yeah,
I'm going to speed up. Sorry for
It's
that.
all right.
So
I'm enjoying it.
I'm glad. So this is one, a lot of people have this idea of, they look at the world and they decide not to say, look, it's me, there's something I can do about it. But there's some, the technology will make it better, or it's other people, or we need to fix this food thing, or when we get better technology, the poverty situation will go away, all this sort of crap. And yeah, there's a couple of reasons why this is not the case. Number one, the technology is just tools that we have and we use. And yeah, if you don't know how to operate or use these tools well, or like, it's very hard for us to design. I don't know. I would say it's even impossible for us to design some tool or technique that makes all of our issues go away without us needing to do anything. And we see a huge risk with things that have happened in the past of technology being used by, let's just say, immature people, or being used for harm and to cause more suffering because it was believed that that was necessary. So this is sort of like a warning to people, like, hey, actually be very, like, I see a lot of stuff online about people, doing like how to live longer, and like there's a lot of really crazy also physics, right? There's a lot of technology out there that if we actually go ahead and create it can end up putting a lot more lives at risk. So I'm going to read this quickly. Regrets. If the radiance of 1,000 suns were to burst at once into the sky, that would be like the splendor of the mighty one. I am become death, the shatterer of worlds. So this is was quoted by J. Robert Oppenheimer. He's attributed as being one of the fathers of creating the atomic bomb. And this is after the bombing in Japan. And this is another quote from him. When we deny the evil within ourselves, we dehumanize ourselves, and we deprive ourselves not only of our own destiny, but of the possibility of dealing with the evil of others. So this is again, well, this alludes to an interesting fact that a lot of psychologists talk about. I think notably Carl Jung talks about this, the shadow, a lot. Like, you need to do this self-reflection and the self-work to have the tools to understand yourself. So now you can, when you go out in the world, you're much more aware of what's really possible, because each of us has these
qualities.
Yeah, I think evil is even a bad term. I think it's all in the context, because it's good to be able to, like this aggression you were feeling, Niels, you were talking about, like there's a time and place where aggression is a good thing.
Setting
and-
healthy boundaries.
Correct. And it's like any tool that we have as well. It's about learning to cope with it. The same way a child who's very angry because he didn't get what he wants screams and cries on the ground and hits his fists, and eventually you have to learn, no, like there's a different way to deal with that anger, and that sort of, a way to deal with it that is actually healthy for me and for other people and so on, like socializing ourselves. And yeah, so there's a game I can recommend called Braid by Jonathan Blow. He's another, I would say, mentor or person that I admire that deals with this topic through the game. This idea of self-reflection, looking at the shadows, looking at things you've done and having an understanding of the world, and understanding what you've done has actually caused a lot of harm in other people.
Mhm.
So yeah, two focus areas that I sort of can see is like, one is like this individual empowerment side, and the other side is the side of building up the system. So I'm just going to rattle off, read off some points here. In terms of individual empowerment, this is the self-growth side. It's, it's about acting, loving, talking, communication, and a lot of, I'm taking a super holistic approach. Like, I'm looking at everything and talking with everyone, and like just leaving my mind open to the fact that I could be wrong, that you're, just taking things and experimenting. And these are just some of the disciplines that I'm looking to. And in terms of the system side of things, yeah, it's dealing with things like economics, management, government, identity. How do you set up organizations? And these are, again, just some of the different fields that seem to be very relevant to this sort of domain. Let's look. So this is the term I'm using to coin how I'm like looking and testing things. Rich Hickey, he already took HDD for hammock-driven development, so I decided had to do this little annoying thing again with hypothesis. But the idea is, first of all, you come up with an hypothesis, which then you can then use to to make solutions, which you then test by doing experiments. And then that's a recursive thing. So you know, out of the experiments, you make new hypotheses, which you make new solutions, which you test by doing experiments. So it's like an ongoing infinite process. And how do you do these? How do you do these? How do you come up with these solutions? And like, how do you generate these hypotheses? And these are some of the techniques that you can use, like visualizing. Analogy is a good way. Thought experiments, and observing the world as well, like making some observations, thinking about it. And so certain scientists, I think intuitively this is what they do, but the way the scientific method is written is a bit confusing. And there are a lot of scientists who say that unless the thing has been proven and it's like fully understood, like it's not scientific, which is kind of, for me, it's sort of missing the whole point, because the idea is like, hey, look, if we've understood this, a lot of times there's mathematical formula that have been discovered, which people cannot prove that are correct, but you can still use them to do very amazing, powerful things. And it's valuable just for that alone. And they know it's, in a way, you know, it's true because it's doing something that's meaningful to you. You're able to say, look, I want to know the answer to that thing, and it does it. You just don't know how it works. And so it's sort of, we don't know, I think it may be impossible for us to fully know everything how it works, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't use the tools and the understanding we gain by using those tools. Yeah, so this is how I'm sort of going to look at these two different sides, and we can start to break apart and come. I'm sort of helping or leading people along the derivation of some of these things that I've figured out, or that I'm the way that I'm structuring this project, let's say. So one thought experiment is, and this is something that you should go away and do, because me just talking about it, or like, it's not the same as actually sitting down, looking in your brain for how do you understand yourself and the world, and how do you understand this experience and what you feel. So I can guide it a little bit, but it won't be the same level of depth of understanding if you do this on your own, in your own time and your own curiosity, and look at your being. So this is, yeah, imagine you are the best amazing you that could ever exist. You always do what you want. You have an amazing skill set. You're this leader, courageous, you know, this super intelligent, like everything, all the personality stuff, the stats, like 100. And now you get put in this small tribe where maybe you don't even speak the language. And all of a sudden, you know, let's say let's say there's an unhealthy culture in this tribe where there's a lot of harm and unnecessary things going on, or violence or situations. And you've come from this place where you just love interacting with people, you enjoy life and doing creative, working together. And you're like, oof, like, you know, this is not, I'm in this environment now, it's different. And imagine not being able to speak the language. And then like you run that scenario through your head, like how would that go? First of all, how do you exist in a way that is just comfortable for you? Then how do you exist in a way that is, how do you start making change in an environment like that? Like what are the different skills you need to do? And like, yeah, very interesting experiment to do. I encourage everyone to do that. So some of the things that come out of that is you realize like this idea of like, you know, what you're hoping for people to grow and to mature into is like, yeah, their ability to be more loving to other people. Like this is, and once the skill, or towards themselves even, and once the skill sort of improves, like, and again, I haven't really defined love, but let's just skip over that for now, because otherwise it'll take, I think, too long. But yeah, like this is one of the things that sort of fit it. Like, yeah, again, we're looking at the social aspects. You definitely sort of realize, hey, I don't want to be in the bush alone for 20 years. Like I'd rather sort of, you know, be able to form friendships, and even if it's a bit toxic, there's still something about it that's like, you know, there's value in that. And I think one of the other things that less than sign is supposed to be flipped the other way around. Like, actually, no, it's correct. Yeah, behavioral is better than verbal. So no matter, I mean, people who've traveled will realize this, you know, you can still form deep, intimate connections with people who don't speak the same language with you, just on the way that they are. And that's the same with animals and things like that. It's not, you don't need to talk. And a lot of the times we get really mixed up in this when we interact with each other. It's like, you know, why am I this person said this thing and this and that. We get so caught up in what they've said, but it's generally not what they've said. It's more like how they're treating us and how we're also treating other people. Yeah, and like this, if you put yourself in that situation, you definitely realize like this, it's difficult. It's not, you're dealing with suffering and like needing to educate people, and you're going to be getting hurt by doing it. You're interacting with people who, yeah, potentially are toxic and potentially harmful, and that takes a lot out of you. And so sort of just being aware of that is also like, so it's not a surprise of like, oh my gosh, like this is difficult. In here I do like a little bit of a difficulty matrix, and I use like different spiciness levels. But you can see, if you look at the world around you, like certain people want to form different little societies on their, like they're like, look, it's too hard to change all these problems. Like, let's go off and make our own little thing, like a commune or something. And that's a little bit easier, right? Like maybe what would that be? That would be like a mild like difficulty for the individual. Or if you're active, here I put active, like you're actively able to put love out into the world, even in, let's say, a difficult situation. And if you're in an environment that's healthy, where people are nice and so on, like it's kind of, if a conflict comes up, it's generally fairly easy to resolve it. There's not too much energy you need to expend. If you haven't yet mastered the ability of active love, let's say, and you're very reactive to your environment. So when you're in a good group of friends, you're fine. But when you're not in a group of, like you're not able to on your own really pull it out of you. Like it just happened. You have these, if a conflict's there, you sort of really struggle because it's not the default reaction of you in a conflict to, let's say, be loving, or you haven't got that capability. So that's like a bit tougher at that point. If you're, and then once you start putting yourself in environments where the system is sick, or there's more, and of course these are variable, right? It's not binary, sick or healthy, but how many people have these, there's different degrees of all of this stuff. How much skill do you have in these different areas? Something just to think about, like based on where you are, there might be a certain point in time where, okay, like I cannot handle being around toxic people. But once you sort of really get to, a certain level of confidence and have a good support network and different things like that, you might have a much larger load of like toxicity that you can handle. And I think at my job, we see this, like we deal oftentimes, we're consultants, so we go to different companies and work with them and help them transform their businesses. And it can be very challenging based on who you're dealing with. And it could be very easy, or it could be very, very hard based on that structure that's in place. This is another great exercise for visualizing the second part, which is system. So if you want to understand, let's back up for a bit, things like economics, government, organizations, even software, or even like another system, also the human being, we're actually also a system. So if you want to understand yourself, systems are actually amazing things to understand. So one great thought experiment is this is just one that I've done, but there's so many different ones you could do. And systems are complex though, like not unnecessarily so. Like there's just the way that they are is complex. And I realize that's why it's been so hard for me to formalize the ideas that I have, because I'm trying to work on the system level. And you cannot just say something. When we get to there's a couple of slides later where you actually see where the complexity comes from. So sorry to be jumping around all the time. Sort of have to learn to be a bit more on point with my explanations. So this example I had was like, I'm a person, and or the car is the person. Yeah, as I wrote there, yeah, the person is a car. The cars, drive around, let's say, a city. And you might say, instead of like the world around us or the systems, we say it's like the road. And is that clear? Like how this visualization and all, like, like I think that explanation I gave was kind of rubbish, but is anyone scratched?
Yeah, it's okay. I understand what you mean.
Yeah, so the cars, the way they drive, they stop and they start, and this is like people talking to each other. The car driving on the road is me walking, or interacting with the legal system, or with the governments, or with computer software. Just anything, any system. So by doing that exercise, one thing that becomes apparent is that everything else that is going on is probably much more complex than just you. So this also solidifies the idea that you should probably start with yourself, because it's easier than understanding these huge complicated things. This is I like this one about energy is required for you to move around. So, and if we look at, I was talking about depression, if we think of it as energy in a way, like when you do what it is that you want in your life, you sort of get this boost, you get topped up. And yeah, it's definitely not a food thing, you know, like you can be eating fine and healthy, but still be depressive. So how do you top up this car and maintain it so that it moves around at a good pace and is able to, you know, and another one is, again, is like this reactivity of the environment, this pain is like, if you're a car that's very soft and fragile, or not, you know, not expensive, I don't know, like you're very cheaply made, you might only be able to go on very smooth roads, or you might not be able to go fast, or if there's a lot of bumps in the way, you might not have a suspension yet. So you need to like put suspension in the car. So you get these ideas of, did you say something, Neil? Sorry.
No, you're good.
Yeah.
Some pop-ups came out of nowhere.
Okay.
Sorry.
I think I might have hit the mic or something.
Okay.
And yeah, if you also do this analogy, start looking at things like, how do the laws come into play? Who controls them? How do they affect me when I'm driving on the road and dealing with other people? Sorry. Okay, I'll keep talking. I don't know if someone said something. It was, so you start to see it as well, like, you know, if I'm driving on the road and there's a law that I don't like, how do I get that changed? Why is that process so difficult? Like, why are we all accepting the fact that there's a 30 sign here on this road when clearly it should be like a 60? So these are, yeah, these sort of thought experiments enable us to think about things away from all of the normal attachments and associations we have when you might think about the education system or your job, and all of a sudden, all of these feelings and negative emotions you've had, or positive ones, or we're very quick to load in memories or ideas we have. And this is why these analogies give us a new map, a new way to start to think and to paint out and to understand things. So again, I would I'd recommend people to do those exercises. So it sort of just comes back to this point that we seem to be the easiest thing to understand, like much easier to understand than all of the other cars on the road. We're easy to, if I just understand my one car first and not how all of the other ones dance together, like I'll probably, then I know how to drive mine at least, you know, and then I know I'm not hitting things. I understand about the environment. I know that I can go on the bush or not on the bush. And you start to get a bit of not power, let's say, like you're doing better. You're enjoying life more, right? You're no longer, you know how to go left and right instead of just like crash into everything. And this, how are we doing for time? I may just keep going, like for the sake of like the recording and so on. But if people want to drop off, or if people are like, oh man, this is too long, I want to go out and enjoy the sun, like just do it. So I appreciate everyone being here, and I do look forward to getting feedback as well, and hearing everyone's ideas. But I do also understand if people want to jump off, but I'm just going to keep going. So don't feel like you need to stay around. Yeah. So, and that should have been on a new slide, I guess. But yeah, as far as another reason to do the self work is because if we want to make impact in the world, it's like, let's use the best, most advanced tool for that. And the best, most advanced tool that we seem to have is actually humans or ourselves. We're able to do so many things and just like think and be creative and work with each other and communicate. Like all of the microscopes and these sort of things that we build only are very specific tools, and they don't have like, we're sort of the ultimate tool, let's say. So we should start by learning how to master that one first. Like not first, but we should do that. Like we should be thinking about that. How can I be improving myself? And this is me just getting excited. Like there's so many cool things that you can learn. Like last year, I just went on this huge adventure of learning new stuff, getting out of the habits and beliefs that I had about myself, starting to learn to paint and draw again, and like to sing and to, yeah, there's really cool things out there in the world, like lucid dreaming, yeah, body temperature regulation. Like a lot of people are not comfortable to get up and dance, and just like, there's so many untapped things that we have, also with our brain. Tantra, sexual experience is also something a lot of people in this society, at least Western society, do not tap into. We just sort of take it like, this is the experience that I've had. Maybe when it could be, we're very content to not dive deeper and to expand that level of understanding. So yeah, when did you last try something new? Is everyone there? Because I cannot hear anything.
No. Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just wanted to make sure it wasn't. Well, it's actually fine if
Yes.
I'm talking to myself. Okay, when did you last say, I am introverted, or I am, unintelligent, I'm not smart, or I don't like this thing, I can't do that? When did you last give yourself excuses for not doing what it is that you wanted, or for trying something new? Try something new. You will not get different results from feeling, thinking, or acting the same way. Yeah, if you want different results, yeah, you may, of course, fail and stumble and fall, but that's part of the process. So, goal is a world with less suffering in it. Okay, so we understand that seems to be the problem. We understand the problem is like something to do with people and individuals, and there's also this other part of it which seems to be secondary, is like we have this world or system we interact with for certain reasons that also seems to make it a bit more difficult. Yeah, so I think we might have to, first of all, I think I know a bit about systems. Can I just get like ask people, like, does anyone have much experience thinking or dealing with the systems, or like, thinking about the connectedness between different parts and how they work together and change? Just like a yes or no.
Yes.
A bit.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
What about, yeah? Anyone else?
I just want to know what kind of systems you're talking about, like in general or?
In general, in the general sense.
Okay, then yes, like symbiosis kind of things.
Yeah. Cool. Other people? Anyone know? Anyone, does anyone not have like, is anyone like, wow, this is like systems? Like, what is like, I don't think about things in terms of the connectedness or the relations between them. Okay. I'll just assume the silence. Ooh.
You will get used to it. Like when you're talking with a bunch of online meeting, most of the time, all of the people will be like silent. I had that kind of experience for a couple, like 6-7 months. So there will be 40-50 people and everyone was listening. No one is like, trying to
Yeah.
interact. That happens.
Oh shit! Someone was trying to enter the room. Simon, did you see that?
No.
Okay, so let me show you some cool stuff about systems. So this is oh my gosh. So this is just to like, oh my gosh. Sorry. Okay, so this is a example of a system. I'm going to show first of all a short explanation of what the system is, and then we'll look at it actually running, and then I'll give a bit more of a formal definition of what's about systems. Oh, everyone can see that, right, and hear it? Let me know if you can't.
This is John Conway's Game of Life. The Game of Life consists of some squares in a space. They are the points in space, sometimes referred to as cells. And a point can be either on or off. Black is on, white is off. And you can also call it alive or dead. Now there's a simple rule that tells us whether or not cells stay alive or they die. And that's this. If a cell has if it has no neighbors that are alive, it dies. If it has just one neighbor that's alive, it'll die. So both of these will die. But if it has two neighbors that are alive, it'll stay alive. So look what happens to this cell. It's going to stay alive on the next moment of time. Of course, something else weird happened there, right? These two died, and these two became alive. They were born. Let's look at that again. This cell only has one live neighbor. It's going to die. Same here. It's going to die. So on the next generation, that one will die and that one will die. But there's a rule for birth. And the rule for birth is this. If a cell has exactly 3 live neighbors, it will be born. This cell has exactly 3 live neighbors. And so does that one. So these two will die, and that will be born. And
Okay, so that's like the rules of the system, you know, how it has to behave. So let's check out what happens when you run this system. When I make this full screen, explaining the rules again. I'll skip forward again. You can watch the video later and it's going to get a bit more complicated. So this is an idea. This is a very simple set of like rules, like, you know, if a cell has these many neighbors, it comes alive and so on. And what happens if you pass time over it? And you see this huge expansion of possibilities and things that can happen. And if you try to look at that system, if let's say one of those little, when it's running halfway through, and you try and come up and tell how it works, and you start measuring the different things, and you get into all these details that are not just effects of the rules, essentially. You don't discover the rules itself. There's a very limited amount of power you will get. As soon as someone tweaks even 1 or 2 of those little dots, the starting dots, and then runs it, you'll get a very different result. And all that experimentation and research you did will have been for nothing. Or not for nothing, you'll learn something, but it will not give you that much control or power over deciding what to do. So this is like one reason why systems are cool, because when you understand them and you tweak 1 or 2 things, you can get, yeah, this is where you start doing magic. It's like bang, like woof, all of a sudden you have created this thing where if you, let's say, wanted to make one of those, did I close it? If you wanted to make one of those crazy little machine things that are going and creating other things, it's called Game of Life, and it's interesting because it's, you know, they have this concept of birth and life and death, and it seems like the thing is alive even. And I've lost my thought train on that, but so I'll just stop. Okay. So that's the Game of Life, and that's just an example of systems. And let's quickly talk about what are the different parts of a system? What are the things that we can talk about? And a system always requires 2 different entities. That doesn't mean they don't have to be the same thing. You know, in one system, I could be the sender and the receiver could be the table, let's say. Or if I look at myself, the sender could be the part of me maybe that is thinking, and the receiver could be the part of me that's reacting to the thoughts that are happening. There's different ways that you can sort of think about systems. So senders and the receiver like interact with each other. There's a communication or an exchange that happens between them, and that happens over time. And through this interaction, there's always something that's changed. There's this is my own actually like definition of having like thought about things. Like I didn't go to I read a little bit about systems and so on, but as far as I can tell, there's always an effect that happens after this communication. So either the sender or the receiver changed, or there's something else in the world that is changed outside of this. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure if something outside of the system can be changed, but let me just skip over that for now. So systems, yeah, exist in a context or always in a environment. It's hard to have a system that doesn't have that. There's always a, for instance, an example with the car and the road, or the person and the other cars, like they're existing on the road. So the road is influencing both of them in that case. It's like the context around everything. Or in the case of when I think about myself as a system, like my context or environment that I'm in is all of the past experiences I've made that make me who I am today, the way I think, the way I feel. When I say something, that is communicate with myself or someone else. This whole environment is important. And if we look at, if I bring up the Game of Life video again, so the environment is like all of these other things that are existing. So as soon as you pop, if I was to plop one new colored square, a couple of them in, and it was a new environment, nothing was there, it would have a very different effect on the world than if I'm putting it in halfway through this one that's been running for a while. So the environment is also a part to consider. Yes. So the definition I came up with is a system has some elements that are interacting that follow a set of principles or rules. They always exist in a context, or a state, and running the system affects the context of the system or updates the state of the system. So over time, there's either the sender or the receiver are being updated, changed, or the environment is being changed. Well, yeah, as I've written at the bottom, the elements themselves, the senders and receivers, are part of the environment. So yeah, I don't think they need to be updated, but yeah. So this is a bit more motivation for doing self-work and self-growth. Instead of looking out to the world and the systems that we detest, the monetary system or whatever it is, and complaining about that as being the cause of everything, or the family or whatever it is. That's the way I am. It's because of my mom. Like that may be the case that that would have had an effect over you. The interaction with anyone will probably have an effect on you. That's true. But right in this point in time, if we let go of that, we start having the ability to make change. And again, here at the little bottom of the diagram, we see that we as individuals or people are the ones who actually make systems by interaction, by doing things, by creation. And these systems make change in the world. So, or in us as well. So when I interact with someone and I try something new, or I start, having a different system now, or rules about the way I decide to behave and treat myself or others, or there's a consequence, a change. And this is good. Like this is, if we want to make change, this is how we should do it. We start by empowering ourselves first. And yeah, so a system, again, it had this part about, what did I have it say in there? They're following a set of principles. And here I've changed the name system for game, because I find a game is a system, and it gives us a little, I think most people intuitively also know a little bit about a game. A game has some rules, people come and they interact and they play in these rules, and things happen, like you may get points, or you may feel good or happy, or depending on what the designer of the game wanted. We want people to get frustrated when they play this game, and then or to laugh, or to be, So there's also a part of the game is also a design element, which is, how was this game made, and why was the game made the way that it was? The heading here is a bit out of place, not rules, but tools. But I'll just highlight the thinking behind that. In the visualization exercise I was talking about, if we put ourselves in a tribe where we were there and interacting with people, and you couldn't speak the language with them, you very quickly realize what you want is tools or methods for a way of being, of interacting, and to know how to, when something happens, you sort of know how to, you have power now, you know how to behave and to act. And oftentimes what happens in our society is we're a very rule-based society. When like we sort of, and the bad thing about a rule is they ignore the environment or the context. It's, you should not go across the street when the light is red. And you'll see many people in Germany, they'll sit there in the middle of the night time, there's no cars coming, it's totally safe to cross the road. I think they know that, but they're in this rule mindset where they're not taking the environment into account. And the rule dominates. And the problem with that is rules do not dominate. Like what works in one situation, in one environment, is only dependent on the environment looking that way. And as soon as, for one student, the right rule for him at that point in time might be, you should wake up every morning, or so, like wake up, hang on, I have an example I think that makes it a bit easier. Yes, so what I wanted to say is, like, here I said something, a game is not rules but tools. I think it rhymes, it's kind of catchy, like, we shouldn't have rules, we should make tools. And I don't want people to take this and to start whacking everyone around, like without actually understanding it and having context around it. And I see this a lot in my company. We have a lot of, unfortunately, they sort of become these rules that people whack around. You work in this way, we use pair programming, we have these ideas about how things should be, and we use test-driven development, these sort of ways of these tools. I think I conflated those terms a little bit, but it's in their mind, it's like, we use these things have been told to me, or I don't cross the light when it's red. Like, this is rule that we're sort of following, and we're ignoring the fact that it serves a purpose. Yeah, it's a tool, it serves a purpose, and the point is serving that purpose and being able to switch that rule out for something else that fits better when the need arises. Yeah, so it's related to do with just not actually learning how to think about things, and like not just being like, all right, I got it. It's like very quick to be like, oh yeah, do that thing like that. But it's not the same as actually understanding and being able to apply it in different environments. So here's an example of a text that may have been, let's say I wrote today to someone, hey, yesterday was nice, let's meet there again. I set that over a chat message or an email. I probably know what I meant by that, or the person also knows what was meant by that. But come back in, like, let's say a couple of weeks or 3 months, and you look there and you're like, gosh, yesterday was not, and you're like, okay, what day was yesterday? I don't know, what day was yesterday? Depending on which program you're using, it may be very easy to find the date. And then you have to like look back in all the history to find the context, to understand the environment, so that you knew which place it was. So this message would have been, is something that's fine in that specific situation, but not 3 months later. And you sort of have to know how, do I look at my messages all the time 3 months ago? And you'll see that people come up with rules for things like this, right? They'll be like, when you write an email to me or just do something with me, make sure it follows these sort of rules. And I may have, or you like, sometimes you have the feeling like, okay, that is just like a rule that they've adopted or something from the past. And, it may have made sense then, or, but it's a bit outdated. It doesn't really fit the real situation anymore. And they saw this fact that, okay, my messages are being confusing in the past, and they make a rule. So now every time I write a message, instead of saying yesterday, I always put the date. And instead of saying there again or places in the abstract, I always talk specifically, put the names in. That way I never have that problem. So they always do this extra work when maybe 99% of the time it wasn't necessary to do it. So sort of just painting a picture here of, for me, it's something that's become very intuitive, this understanding. But I do see a lot of people falling into this trap, and it causes a lot of harm. Yeah. So, I think I already gave a couple of examples of this rule-based inclination we have. And a friend of mine used the term Rex positivismus, which is like being, I don't know if, I guess one of the German speakers can tell me. I don't know if that's the inclination to follow law or rules in general.
Can you say that again?
Rex, like Rex positivismus.
Rechtspositivismus? Do you mean that?
Yeah, positivismus. Yeah, exactly.
Never heard that.
Okay.
Sounds a little bit more Latin, which definitely would tie in with the philosophy angle. Let's see.
Yeah.
Oh.
Uh,
yeah. Oh, it's a German Wikipedia page. Let me.
I heard something like that, right is always right. Something like that.
Yeah,
right. Positivismus.
It feels like that. Like, yeah, it's this idea that the rules have to be followed and they are sort of absolute and you don't question them. And so this is something I bump up into all the time, like currently dealing with that at work. They're
it kind of sounds like the foundation for how ideology comes to be, right?
I have a
follow-
different theory about how ideology comes to be.
Okay.
But yeah, it's I think a side effect of that.
Yeah, or probably one aspect of it.
Sure.
Yeah. So things like hiring, like for instance, hiring people, like people might look at the qualification. You need to have this thing, and that's like a rule. And it's like, well, the point of that is to what? It's to check to make sure that they've able to do the job at hand.
Yeah.
And this qualification really is I've seen so many people hire that have a master's degree that the skill level is very different. But just because of the master's degree, they're getting paid and validated and treated as if they were, amazing person. And this is a very big confusion or even in relationships.
Fuck, yeah.
This person is my partner, so I need to treat them nicely. So even though it's like a rule again, even though they're not being nice to us or treating us badly, we can sort of delude ourselves and follow these rules. And the systems around us as well are full of this, that when you interact with people, like it can be very painful when you're suffering and you don't get the help or support you need because people, oh no, sorry, like I cannot help you out because you're not from this country or whatever, or you don't have the visa, or you don't, and it's like all you needed to do was like press the button or like something, like you could make such a substantial change in someone's life, but sorry, that's not our process. And it's
like it makes me think of like feature creep in gaming, like especially that resume part kind of resonates with me because this is kind of a symptom of like our digital age and everybody being good at something and everybody having access to a lot of free-ish software. But like, I'm not an illustrator anymore. I'm a motion graphic designer. I'm an editor. I'm a sound guy. I do all these different things just to qualify for like one very specific job. And it's like jobs are looking for more qualifications and more specific qualifications. And I'm wondering if like maybe one of the reasons that is because, I don't know, they want to like really, really weed out the applicants and save themselves a bunch of time by saying, okay, this is exactly what we want. And it's almost
so-
impossible to fulfill that, or it's very difficult to fulfill that. And people who don't fulfill all those, necessary prerequisites, don't get the job, or often don't even apply. And like, from a woman's perspective, women tend to not apply to work that they don't specifically fill the requirements for, which is a lot of the reasons why you have like less women in higher paid or like STEM fields. It's because they go, oh, well, I don't have that specific PhD. Whereas guys are just like, yeah, I'm going to get that job. It's great. But the gender part of it's not as relevant to the conversation, but like the idea of feature creep.
Yeah, I would like to go into the gender topic, but I just feel like it's
Yeah,
another
you
issue.
have to worry about that.
It'll come up another time for sure.
Sure. This is wider.
But can someone take notes down for me? I don't know, like Saim, if you want to take some notes, like something I would be interested to do is actually go and interview these people who come up with
Yeah,
these processes. Because you made some hypotheses there about where that could come from. And it'd be interesting just to sit down and actually like, hey, like let's do a bit of poking and see. Because my hypothesis is probably more along the lines of they were just told to I think a lot of people when they aren't self-actualized, where you're not grown up to a level where you're confident to speak your mind, to act out against the things you see in the world that are not good, is because of this nature to belong to the group and this to be a part of the clan and to be accepted. This is, as I mentioned at the beginning, a huge driving force, thank you, in how we behave, is we lose our creativity. We stop this individual part of us because, people also don't know how to treat us properly. So when I start to act differently, they put their fears onto me. No, you sure you want to do that? Because they may be fearful of being self-employed or whatever it is. So they sort of don't give you the push or the courage you need, or the little, hey, you can do it, and so this creativity drops down dramatically. And I believe, like when you look at cultures, the fact that most cultures have there's different reasons for this, but they have a similar clothing style, they have a similar way that they cook, they have a similar way that they do music, and an individual, I think, has so much more in them that they could discover or put out into the world. But it's nuanced. A part of it is the environment influencing us, but I think a big part of it is also people not daring to be different, to think. So instead of, and it could also be laziness, which is another important factor. Like we want to do things the quickest way. But if we're passionate about what we're doing, if I'm passionate about hiring people, as you were talking about, then what I want to do is to think about what's the best way to hire people. And if I notice, hey, look, these qualification things are not really bringing any value to us, and they're actually pushing people away. If I'm really interested in my job and talking to people and I'm going to be improving this process. But if I'm not, all I do is I see how everyone else does it and I copy it. You see, in the same way we copy food or apps like this. How many apps are there for email or messaging or anything? They're the same thing. Or video games or movies. It's like millions of dollars go into these things, and it's like, yeah, it's exact same as that one for like. It's quite sad. Like and I believe people just don't have it's hard to speak up to the boss and say, hey, I want to do it differently. Like you have to learn how to do that to find yourself and your place in the world. But I think this is sort of what big part of what this project is finding out these tools and how to do this and how to give that to people.
Like independent, I don't want to say something like independent thinking is a muscle, because maybe that's a little too strong, but something like that.
I definitely think all skills are a muscle. I like that. And this is something I learned from Niels. I just gonna give Neil some appreciation, because I think he was one of the first people in a long time that was so, I would say, enjoying life and inspirational and curious and creative. And he, at the gym, for instance, he had one session he was giving that wasn't even about moving your body or actually working out and so on, like a lot of the other ones were, but it was, what's the theory behind this stuff? And I was like, well, that's so interesting, because I always wanted to know, why am I doing what I'm doing and what makes sense? And I went to these sessions like quite a few times, and this idea, like one of the things that stuck with me is like, use it or lose it. And this is that idea of the muscle, right? So I started applying that to all different areas in my life, like dancing or things that I thought I couldn't do,
Mhm.
or like pain I have in my body, or like, okay, like what happens if I try, like apply, start this use it or lose it mentality and give myself the time and space to slowly reacclimatize, to give my body the capability and not just say, I can't do it or so on.
Mhm.
And like, yeah. And like thinking is a muscle. Like just to give everyone a little, share some of the change that I've been going through. Like it's only very recent that I could be so productive and organize a talk. And I've been writing, I have enough material. If I wanted, I could write probably like 20 books or something. And before this, I always wondered, like, if you look at some very prolific, philosophers or authors, they put out like 4 or 5 books a year, and I'd be like, well, how do they even do that? Like, I don't manage to finish one project. Like, my motivation's so low, and like, for me, it's impossible.
Mm.
And just through like practicing this thinking muscle in different areas and so on, like you sort of just start to ramp up, and you're like, wow, like all of a sudden I'm like a complete different skill level, where before I was barely managing to walk, and now I'm like almost sprinting all the time.
Mhm.
So
Hey, hold on to that. Yeah.
yeah, not even just
That's
hold
good.
on, but keep training. Is that what I
Yeah,
say?
yeah.
And how
good.
many of us stop learning, right? Like our system does not incentivize us to keep learning in our jobs or curiosity. Like it's,
Mhm.
yeah.
I had a whole like college course about that called design thinking, and the crux of the course was, the crux, but like one of the first introductions to it was, it's really common for creative thinking to be like more or less beaten out of you by, not just teachers, but just life in general. And it taught like, I want to go back to that course because it taught like techniques on like engaging creative thinking. And it was specifically for like making and designing products that people actually need, and like user-based designs. So instead of creating like a slick iPod that doesn't really function or fit in your hand, you are looking to make something that fits in someone's hand to solve a problem or whatever. But it all kind of
Yep.
ties into that idea that creativity is like, anybody could be creative. It's just often it's squashed out of you, and you've got to like work out to get those juicy brain muscles working again.
Yeah.
So that's very interesting. I'll look up some more course materials because I'm sure there's tons of stuff that would apply to this.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. It reminds me a lot of like the agile way of working, and how, of building products, not based on like an upfront specification, but sort of more an iterative approach. And yeah, I definitely believe anyone can be creative. And I just want to, like, one thing you said, I disagree with the fact you said like in general, like life squashes it out of you. And I don't think it's life that does that. It's our systems that we've built, that we interact with, that squash
Yeah.
it out of us.
Yeah.
I think once you start to get into nature and you just become aware of the apparent beauty over everywhere, and you start to get this intrinsic joy, and you just have the creativity just comes out, I think. And it comes back to that, what do we want to do? It's like work, but for me, it's more like, I want to be creative. Like right now, I have something I want to do. I want to share this. I want to build something up. I want to make change and educate people, and I'm having fun doing this. And it is work though. Like I had to stay up kind of late last night and wake up early this morning to get this slideshow done. And I'm, figuring out how to do legal stuff, and like it's stuff that I don't really enjoy. It's work, but for me, there's a reason I'm doing it. There's a creative thing as well.